What is the main advantage of a horizontally opposed engine over a radial engine for powering modern aircraft? The horizontally opposed engine has a much smaller frontal area and is easier to streamline than a radial engine. How many throws are there in the crankshaft of a 6-cylinder horizontally opposed engine? 6. What kind of connecting rod arrangement is used in a radial engine? A master rod connects a single throw of the crankshaft with a piston. All other pistons are connected to the master rod with link rods. Of what material are most piston rings made? Gray cast iron. What is the reason for using hydraulic valve lifters in an aircraft engine? Hydraulic lifters keep all the clearance out of the valve operating mechanism. This decreases the wear of the valve train components. At what speed does the camshaft turn in relation to the crankshaft? 1/2 the speed of the crankshaft. What kind of main bearings are used in a horizontally opposed engine? Steel-backed lead alloy inserts. On what stroke is the piston when the intake valve begins to open? Exhaust stroke. On what stroke is the piston when the exhaust valve begins to close? Power stroke. Why are both hot and cold clearances given for radial engines? The hot clearance is given for valve timing purposes. The timing is adjusted with the valves in the number 1 piston adjusted with the hot clearance. When the timing is set, all of the valves are adjusted to their cold clearance. What is meant by campground piston? A piston that is not perfectly round. When the piston reaches operating temperature, the metal in the piston pin boss expands enough that the piston becomes perfectly round. Where is the piston when the ignition spark occurs? 30 degrees before TDC. What is a full floating wrist pin? A wrist pin that is not clamped in either the piston or the connecting rod. Soft metal plugs keep the floating pin from scoring the cylinder wall. Why do most engines use more than one spring on each valve? Different springs with different diameter and pitch have different resonant frequencies which minimize valve float. Would excessive valve clearance cause the valves to open early or late? Open late and close early. What is the purpose of valve overlap? Exhaust gas inertia leaving the cylinder helps the fresh induction charge flow into the cylinder, leading to 1. Better volumetric efficiency, 2. Lower cylinder temperatures. What types of piston rings are installed on the pistons? Compression rings, oil control rings, oil wiper rings. Why are some exhaust valves partially filled with metallic sodium? It melts at operating temperature, sloshing back and forth. It picks up heat, transfers heat to the valve stem, which in turn transfers it to the cylinder head. What causes detonation? Excessive heat and pressure in the cylinder causes the fuel-air mixture to reach its critical pressure and temperature, which causes an explosion rather than a controlled burn. Why is a compression check important in determining the condition of an engine? The compression check determines the condition of the seal between the piston rings and the cylinder walls, and the seal between the valves and their seats. What is meant by compression ratio? The compression ratio is the volume of the cylinder with the piston at the bottom of its stroke to the top of its stroke. What cylinder is engine to magneto timing based on? Number 1 cylinder. What are the main causes of the cylinder having low compression? Broken rings, rings that do not seat properly, burnt valves, poorly seating valves. What should be done to a nose wheel plank before removing the engine? Support the tail. How are conventional reciprocating engines classified? They are classified according to 1. Cylinder arrangement, inline, radial, V-type, opposed to method of cooling, liquid, air. What is the purpose of the oil control rings? Controls oil thickness on the cylinder walls. What may be the result of installing piston rings incorrectly? Excessive oil consumption. What type of bearings are used in a reciprocating engine? 1. Plain bearings for crankshaft, camshaft, connecting rod. 2. Roller bearings for crankshaft main bearings. 3. Ball bearings for supercharger impeller shaft bearings. What is the indication of valve blow-by? A hissing whistling sound when turning the propeller, thus requiring a compression check. Describe the inspection you would give the valve springs during engine overhaul. They should be 1. Cleaned thoroughly, then 2. Visually inspected for overheating, cracks, broken ends, and 3. Tested for compression strength. What causes sudden stoppage? 1. Prop strike. 2. Seizure due to internal damage. What type of inspection should be made after sudden stoppage? Complete engine teardown and inspection. What is the purpose of dynamic dampers? Dampers on a crankshaft overcome forces that cause deflection and torsional vibration that are generated by power impulses of the piston. They are floating weights in the counterweight section of a crankshaft. How would you make a run-out check on an installed engine? Remove the propeller and attach a dial indicator gauge to the crankcase. Adjust the gauge needle so that it is touching the shaft. Rotate the shaft and look for misalignment. Refer to the table of limits to check the allowance. What is engine sudden speed reduction? This occurs when a propeller strikes an object but continues to run. When this occurs, a thorough external engine inspection should be carried out, including an oil analysis. The propeller should also be inspected along with a run-out check. What instrument can be used to check bore for out-of-roundness? A cylinder bore can be checked with a dial indicator, telescopic gauge and outside micrometer or inside micrometer. What would a cold cylinder indicate? No combustion, normally due to 1. No ignition. 2. Clogged fuel nozzle. Where is a crack most likely to occur in a piston? The metal is thinnest where the piston pin connects. What are the 2 basic sections of a turbine engine? Hot and cold sections. What are the 2 types of compressors on a turbine? Axial flow and centrifugal. What is the purpose of the stators in an axial flow compressor? Stators 1. Convert some velocity energy into pressure energy and 2. Change the direction of the air so that it is proper for the next stage of rotors. What are 3 types of turbine combustors? Annular, canannular, reverse flow annular. How many igniters are common on a turbine? 2. What is the main purpose of the turbine nozzle? Turbine nozzles direct hot gases as they leave the combustor so they will turn the turbine wheel with maximum efficiency. What is meant by a free turbine turboshaft engine? A turboshaft engine has a turbine wheel or stage of turbine wheels that is not used to drive the compressor of the gas generator section. It drives the propeller or a helicopter's transmission and rotor. Why do some axial flow compressors have more than 1 set of turbines and compressors? A 2-spool engine has a low-pressure and a high-pressure compressor, each driven by its own turbine. The 2 independent systems operate at the speed at which they are the most efficient. What kind of bearings are used to support the rotor shaft of a turbine? Anti-friction bearings such as ball bearings or roller bearings. What is meant by turbofan? An axial flow turbine in which the first stage of compressor plates are lengthened so they can force air around the outside the gas generator portion of the engine. Where can you find the repair limits allowed for compressor blades? Manufacturer's FAA-approved service manual. Why is it important that a turbojet be allowed to cool before being shut down? If the engine is shut down while hot, there is the possibility that the shroud will contract around the turbine wheel and seize the rotor. What is a hung start? Ignition occurs, but the engine does not accelerate to a self-sustaining speed. What is a hot start? Ignition occurs, but internal temperature gets high enough to cause internal damage. What is meant by creep of turbine blades? Permanent elongation caused by high temperatures and high centrifugal loading. How is the turbine compressor cleaned? An emulsion-type cleaner is sprayed through the engine while it is being motored by the starter at low speed. The wash is followed by a clean water rinse. A more aggressive clean is used with abrasives of ground walnut shells. Where is water injected into a turbine engine for cooling? Compressor inlet and engine diffuser case. At what point in a turbine engine is it the hottest? Inlet to the high-pressure turbine. What is the purpose of the interconnect tubes between cans of a turbine? Flame propagation during start. What are two types of thrust reversers? Cascade, clamshell. What is meant by trimming a turbojet engine? Adjusting the fuel control for idling and maximum thrust RPM. What are the major components of a typical turbine engine? 1. Air inlet. 2. Compression section. 3. Combustion section. 4. Turbine section. 5. Exhaust section. 6. Accessory section. What prevents the burning of the liner walls in can-type combustion chambers? Louvers along the axial length direct a cooling layer of air along the inside wall of the liner. What type of damage can be found when inspecting compressor blades? Dents, gouges, cracks, galling, burns, pitting, scratches. What is the location and purpose of the diffuser section in a turbine engine? The diffuser is the divergence section of the engine located between the compressor section and the burner cans. It changes high-velocity compressor discharge air into static pressure. Where are stress rupture cracks most likely to occur on turbine blades? They usually appear as hairline cracks across the leading or trailing edge of the blades at right angles to blade length. How are compressor blades attached to a disc-type rotor? They have bulb, fir tree, or dovetail roots locked by means of screws, pins, keys, peening, locking wires. What is the purpose of the nozzle diaphragm or turbine nozzle? The turbine nozzle prepares the combustion mass airflow to drive the turbine rotor. 1. First, heat and pressure energy is turned into velocity energy. 2. Second, the turbine nozzle deflects the gases so they strike the turbine at the most efficient angle for maximum turbine rotation. What is the major difference between the turboprop and the turbojet? Turboprops have more stages than a turbojet engine. In addition to operating the compressor and accessories, the turboprop turbine must also drive a propeller. What is a turbofan? It is turboprop where the propeller is replaced with a duct-enclosed axial flow fan. What is a split compressor system in a turbine? The split system requires two concentric shafts joining the turbine stages to their respective stage. What is one method of relieving thermal stress on a turbine disc? One method is to direct cooling bleed air back onto the face of the disc. What may be one of the indications that the turbojet engine is out of trim? The engine has high exhaust gas temperature at a target engine pressure ratio for takeoff. What is the effect of air density on the thrust of a turbine engine? What determines whether or not a 100-hour inspection is required? Required 1 for hire or 2 for flight instruction. In what publication can a mechanic find the operating limitations of an aircraft engine? TCDS for the engine. What are two types of compression checks? 1. Differential compression check. 2. Direct compression check. What items are checked in a hot section inspection of a turbine? The combustion chamber is checked for cracks or distortion. The turbine wheel, the turbine case, and the exhaust section are checked for cracks, indications of overheating, and any indications of warpage, erosion, or burning. What is the most common type of damage found in the hot section of a turbine engine? Cracks caused by high concentrations of heat. What inspection must be performed on a reciprocating engine that has been operated with jet fuel? 1. The inside of the cylinders must be inspected with a borescope. 2. The oil must be changed and filters examined. 3. The engine must be given a careful run-up and operational check. What steps must be taken to perform an aircraft for a 100-hour inspection? 1. Remove all inspection plates, access doors, fairing and cowling. 2. Thoroughly clean the aircraft and engine. What additional steps must be taken if a cylinder compression test is weak? An internal cylinder inspection for improper tolerances. What publication is needed to inspect an engine for conformity with specifications? Engine Specifications or TCDS. What type of FAA approval is required when a change is made to the engine principle of operation? A new type certificate must be obtained. In what units is the tachometer for a reciprocating engine calibrated? In hundreds of RPM. In what units is the tachometer of a turbine calibrated? Percent of the engine's rated takeoff RPM. Where does the manifold pressure gauge used on a reciprocating engine pick up the pressure it measures? Intake manifold. What are two types of pickups used for measuring the cylinder head temperature of a reciprocating engine? 1. Thermocouple embedded in a spark plug gasket of the hottest cylinder. 2. Thermocouple embedded in a bayonet that is held against the cylinder head by a spring. Why do most engine oil pressure gauges have a restrictor in the line? The restrictor damps out pressure pulsations in the oil to keep the needle from oscillating. What is used to measure the fuel flow of a fuel-injected engine? A pressure gauge that measures the pressure drop across the injector nozzles. What is indicated if the ratiometer type oil temperature indicator pegs the high side of the dial as soon as master switch is turned on? There is an open in the bulb circuit that causes the instrument to see infinite resistance. The higher the resistance in the bulb circuit, the higher the temperature indication. What type of indication system is used to measure the EGT of a turbine engine? A set of thermocouples arranged in an averaging circuit installed in the tailpipe. What should a thermocouple type cylinder head temperature indicator read when the engine is not running? Outside air temp. How does the torque meter actually measure the torque? It is an oil pressure gauge that measures the pressure in a torque sensor which is proportional to the strain in the torsional shaft that drives the reduction gears of the turboprop engine. What two pressures are measured to get the engine pressure ratio? The turbine discharge total pressure and the compressor inlet total pressure. It is an indication of thrust being developed by the engine. Of what two materials are the turbine thermocouple usually made? Chromel and aluminum. What type of mechanism is normally used to measure oil pressure in a reciprocating engine? Burton tube. What is measured by the tachometers on a two-spool turbine engine? N1 tachometer shows RPM of the low-pressure compressor. N2 tachometer shows the RPM of the high-pressure compressor. Does the tachometer of a geared reciprocating engine indicate the speed of the crankshaft or of the propeller shaft? Crankshaft speed. What does a mass fuel flow transmitter measure? Density mass of the fuel that flows through it. What is the typical acceptable resistance of a cylinder head thermocouple cable? 2 to 8 ohms. What is the most likely cause of an oscillating tachometer? Kink in the cable. What type of tachometer is used in a multi-engine airplane? Alternating current tachometer generator. What are the units in an engine fuel flow system? The system consists of a transmitter and an indicator for each engine. Where is the fuel flow transmitter located? The fuel line between the fuel pump and carburetor. What type of readout is indicated on a fuel flow system? The indicator is calibrated in pounds per hour. What is the reason to monitor fuel flow? 1. Fuel consumption. 2. Correct fuel-air mixture at a given setting. What would a broken manifold gauge indicate? Atmospheric pressure. Where is a carburetor air temperature bulb located? Air intake passage. How can a turbine engine EGT be checked without operating the engine? Check the thermocouple resistance and circuits. Can the thermal switch type fire detection system indicate a general overheat condition? No, this is a spot type fire detection system which does not indicate a general overheat condition. Can the thermocouple type fire detection system indicate a general overheat condition? No, this is a rate of rise system and cannot indicate a general overheat condition. How is a thermocouple fire detection system checked for operation? Current is sent through the heater in the thermal test unit. This heats the thermocouple, which produces enough current to close the sensitive relay. Current through the contacts in the sensitive relay closes the slave relay and turns on the fire warning light. Does a break in a continuous loop fire detection system keep the system from detecting a fire? No, the unit will show a fault when tested but will still warn of a fire. Does the pressure type continuous element fire detection system detect a general overheat condition as well as a fire? Yes, a high temperature on a small portion of the sensor or a lower temperature over the entire sensor will cause it to release enough gas to close the diaphragm switch and warn of a fire. What are the two most used fire extinguishing agent used for engine fires? Halon 1301 and CO2. What extinguishing agent is used in the high-rate discharge fire extinguishing systems installed in most turbojet engines? Halon 1301. What happens when the pilot pulls the fire T-handle in the cockpit of a jet transport airplane? 1. Bottle discharge switch is uncovered and armed. 2. The generator field relay is tripped. 3. Fuel is shut off to the engines. 4. Hydraulic fluid is shut off from the pump. 5. Engine bleeder is shut off. 6. Hydraulic low pressure lights are deactivated. How can a mechanic determine the state of charge of the HRD bottle's fire extinguishing agent? A pressure gauge on the bottle shows the pressure of the contents of the bottle. What method is used to discharge an HRD bottle in a turbine engine installation? An electrically ignited powder charge blows a knife through the seal on the bottle and discharges the contents. What type of fire detection system operates on the rate of temperature rise? Thermocouple system. What is indicated if the yellow blowout plug on the side of an engine nacelle is blown out? The built-in fire extinguishing system has been discharged by normal operation. Yellow equals normal. Pilot-initiated discharge due to fire. What is indicated if the red blowout plug of the fire extinguisher system on the side of an engine nacelle is blown out? Red equals abnormal. The fire extinguishing system has been discharged by a high temperature condition. How is a pressure type continuous element fire detection system checked for operation? Low voltage alternating current is sent through the sheath of the detector element. This heats the element and it releases enough gas to close the diaphragm switch. What are the main categories of engine fire protection systems? Spot detection, continuous loop flame detectors. Name examples of spot detection type systems. Thermoswitch, thermocouple. Name examples of continuous loop detection systems. 1. Fenwel. 2. Kidd. 3. Pneumatic. Using a thermocouple fire system, what happens if the engine overheats slowly? A thermocouple system depends on the rate of rise and will not give a warning if the engine slowly overheats or a short circuit occurs. Describe a Kidd fire detector system. Describe a thermal switch fire detector system. Thermal switch systems have one or more lights that are energized by the aircraft's electrical system when a heat-sensitive thermal switch closes the circuit at a specific temperature. How are thermal switches electrically connected in the circuit? Parallel with each other and series with the warning light. A temperature rise in any one circuit will cause a thermal switch to close and complete the circuit to indicate a fire or overheat condition. What is the most common cause of a false warning in continuous loop fire detection systems? Internal damage due to dents, kinks, or crushed elements. The internal wire shorts to the ground wire or outer tubing. What are two methods used to discharge fire extinguishing agents? Mechanical and electrical. What method is used to determine proper fire extinguisher container pressure? Check the container gauge to determine if the pressure is between the prescribed minimum and maximum limits. What method is used to determine low pressure agent in a container other than the pressure gauge? Some aircraft are equipped with a low pressure warning light in the cockpit. What are two methods commonly used to distribute the fire extinguishing agent to the engine? 1. Perforated tube. 2. Discharge nozzles. How does a fire extinguishing agent put out a fire? It dilutes the atmosphere so that it will not support combustion. How long does it take to discharge the extinguishing agent in a HDR system? 1 or 2 seconds. What type of fire detection system gives a more complete coverage to a fire hazard? Continuous loop. Will a continuous loop fire detection system still indicate the presence of a fire if the element is broken into? Yes. What are the color markings used to identify fire extinguishing lines? Brown with a row of black diamonds. Why is a stranded wire used rather than a solid wire in most powerplant electrical systems? Solid wires break when subjected to vibration. What two things must be considered in selection of wire size when making an electrical installation in an aircraft? 1. Current carrying capability of the wire, and 2. Amount of voltage drop that is caused by the current flowing through the wire. Why are the wires in certain electrical installations twisted together? To minimize magnetic fields caused by current flow. What is used to protect a wire bundle from chafing where it passes through a hole in the bulkhead or frame? Grommet. How are electrical wires protected in areas of high temperature? Wires passing through these areas are insulated with high temperature insulation and the wires are enclosed in some type of protective conduit. What is the minimum separation that is allowed between a wire bundle and a fluid line that carries combustible fluid or oxygen? Minimum of 6 inches. What is the significance of the color of solderless connectors? 1. Red 22-18 gauge wire. 2. Blue 16-14 gauge wire. 3. Yellow 12-10 gauge wire. What is the maximum number of wire terminals that may be stacked on a single stud in a terminal strip? 4. What is the purpose of shielding that is used to encase some electrical wires? Shielding intercepts radiated electromagnetic energy and carries it to ground so it will not interfere with any nearby sensitive electronic equipment. Why must a switch be derated if it used in a circuit controlling a DC electric motor? The initial current flowing into a DC electric motor is much higher than the current the motor uses after the armature begins to rotate. Because of this high inrush current, the controlling switches must be derated. What is used as a rectifier to produce direct current in DC generator? Brushes and a commutator. How does a vibrator-type voltage regulator control the output voltage of a DC generator? What is meant by paralleling a twin-engine aircraft? Adjusting the voltage of the generator so they will share the electrical load equally. What is meant by flashing the field of a DC generator? Restoring the residual magnetism to the frame of a generator by passing battery current through the field coils in the same direction it flows when the generator is producing current. What kind of rectifier is used on a DC alternator of the type that is used on most of the modern light aircraft? Full-wave 3-phase rectifier made up of 6 silicon diodes. What is used to maintain a constant frequency of the alternating current that is produced by an AC alternator driven by an aircraft turbine engine? A hydraulic constant speed drive unit between the engine and the alternator. What 3 things must be synchronized before a 3-phase AC generator can be connected to a bus that is being served by another generator? Voltage, frequency, phase rotation of the generators. What must be done to reverse the direction of rotation of the armature of a DC electric motor? The current flow must be reversed through the armature or the field windings, but not through both of them. Does a series wound DC motor have a high or low starting torque? High starting torque. Which aircraft electrical circuit does not normally contain a fuse or circuit breaker? Starter motor circuit. When removing a battery from an aircraft, which connection should be removed first? The ground should be disconnected first and connected last. What is meant by effective voltage of sine wave alternating current? It is the value of alternating current needed to produce the same amount of heat as its value of direct current. What is a starter generator that is used with many of the smaller gas turbine engines? A single engine-mounted component that serves as a starter for starting the turbine engine. When the engine is running, the circuitry can be shifted so it acts as a compound wound generator. When should aircraft wiring be installed in a conduit? When the wiring passes through an area in the aircraft when open wiring could likely be damaged, such as through a wheel well. When is it necessary to replace the brushes in a starter? When they have reached half their original length. What units make up a DC generator 3-unit regulator? 1. Voltage regulator. 2. Current limiter. 3. Reverse current cutout. What determines the frequency of the voltage of an alternator? 1. Speed of rotation of the rotor. 2. Number of poles. What are the 3 basic types of DC motors? Series, shunt, compound. Name the parts of a DC motor. 1. Armature. 2. Commutator. 3. Brushes. 4. Field frame. What methods are used to control the output voltage of a DC aircraft generator? What causes excessive arcing at the generator brushes? 1. Dirty, rough or out of round commutator. 2. Worn or binding brushes. 3. Brush spring tension too low. When installing single wires in bundles, how much slack is normally allowed? No more than 1/2 deflection. How would you seat newly installed generator brushes to the commutator? The face of the brushes must be shaped to provide an area of maximum contact with the commutator. Use fine-grained sandpaper placed around the commutator. Turn the armature in the normal direction of rotation until the brushes are contoured. Remove sandpaper and blow out any residue. What is viscosity? Resistance to flow. What is meant by a wet sump lubrication system? Oil is carried inside the engine. How is oil temperature controlled in a reciprocating engine? Hot oil is directed through the core of an oil cooler, but cold oil is directed around the outside the core so that it will not be further cooled. Is the temperature shown on the instrument panel the temperature of the oil entering or leaving the engine? It is the temperature of the oil entering the engine. What is the purpose of oil dilution? Gas is added to oil in very cold weather. Oil in the hopper is diluted, which speeds up dilution and requires less gasoline. The gasoline evaporates when the engine is running. What indication would a pilot have if his oil supply is low? High oil temperature and low oil pressure. What is the purpose of sludge plugs in the crankshaft of a recip engine? They trap and hold sludge until the engine is overhauled. Which pump is larger in a dry sump lubricating system, pressure pump or scavenging pump? The scavenger pump pumps the greatest volume. Why do full flow oil filters have a spring-operated bypass valve in them? If the filter should plug, the bypass valve will open and allow unfiltered oil to flow. What is the function of a fuel oil heat exchanger in the lubrication system of a turbojet engine? It allows heat from the oil to warm the fuel so ice will not form on the fuel filters. What kind of oil is used in most turbojet engines? Synthetic. Where are the last chance oiled filters located in a turbojet engine? Inside the engine, just ahead of the nozzles that spray oil onto the bearings. Where is the oil tank in a dry sump reciprocating engine vented? Crankcase. What information must be displayed around the oiled filler opening for a turbojet engine? Oil and permissible oil designations or references to the AFM. What is the function of the oil control rings? They maintain the proper quantity of oil between the piston and cylinder wall. What is meant by spectrometric oil analysis? Oil samples are taken from an engine at regular intervals and burned by an electric arc. The resulting light is analyzed for wavelengths of elements that are present in the sample. What is meant by a hot tank lubrication system? A lubrication system in which the oil cooler is located in the pressure system. What is meant by cold tank lubrication system? A lubrication system where the cooler is located in the scavenge subsystem. Oil returned to the tank has been cooled. What is meant by straight mineral oil? It is a type of oil that has no additives for foaming, cleaning or viscosity. What is ashless dispersant oil? A type of mineral oil with additives that evenly spread the contaminants throughout the oil. The additives that are used do not form ashes. What is meant by multiviscosity oil? A type of oil with varying viscosity. When the oil is cold, it will have low viscosity, but when it warms up, the viscosity will increase for better lubrication. 5W30 has a viscosity index of 5 when it is cold, but 30 when it is warm. Where can you find the specified grade of oil for a particular engine? Airplane Flight Manual or Pilot's Operating Handbook. What are the purposes of reciprocating engine oils? Cleans, cools, cushions, seals, lubricates. Primary purpose: reduce friction. What factors must be considered in determining the proper grade of oil to use in a specified engine? Operating load, rotational speeds, operating temperature. What is the purpose of the oil flow control valve? Oil cooler bypass valve. Cool oil is directed around the cooler. Warm oil is directed through the cooler. What are the main oil contaminants? Gasoline, moisture, acid, dirt, carbon, metallic particles. From what location on a reciprocating engine is the oil temperature usually taken? In either system, the bulb is located where it measures oil temperature before it enters the engine. Dry sump system, the bulb is located anywhere between the oil tank and the engine. Wet sump system, the bulb is located where it senses the temperature after the oil passes through the oil cooler. What do metallic particles on an oil screen indicate? They may indicate internal failure of the engine or abnormal wear. What could cause oil foaming? Diluted oil, contaminated oil, oil level too high. What would be an indication of a blocked oil cooler passage? High oil temperature. What are two types of oil coolers used in turbine engine lubrication systems? 1. Air-cooled oil cooler. 2. Fuel-cooled oil cooler. What is the meaning of oil flash point, fire point? Flash point is the temperature at which oil gives off ignitable vapors. Fire point is the temperature at which there are sufficient vapors to support a continuous flame. What is the weight of engine oil? 7.5 pounds. What is the primary purpose of an engine oil lubricant? Reduce friction. What is the key purpose of lubrication in a turbine engine? To lubricate the main shaft bearings. What is the main advantage